Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 436. I am your host, Michael. Uh, Joining me this evening, Daniel from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber Podcast. What's going on, Daniel?
What's crack-a-lacking, folks?
Gail from nyfights.com. She's feeling a little bit under the weather, so she will not be joining us live this evening. Hopefully, she's listening. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, website, podcast. Uh, etc. Talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. And there's a good bit to discuss, particularly over the last 24 hours. Um, if you want to find out any and all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. If you wish to email us with any questions, thoughts, suggestions, etc., you can do so. P4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you'll find links to where to catch us, where to catch the Pound for Pound report all over social media, links to the YouTube channel, links to the Facebook, IG, Twitter page. Um, if you wish to donate, got a Cash Me and PayPal donation links for those who are getting their tax returns back and they have some spare coin and want to contribute dollar, $2, $5, it wouldn't matter to us. Any amount we will be eternally grateful for. Um, Last but certainly not least, for those who are looking to get their body right as we get ready to head into the spring, um, check out the link to BODI Body, formerly known as Beach Body on Demand. Fitness programs with any and all suitable fitness goals and interest. If you're interested in just strictly weightlifting program, bodybuilding program, uh, Body has programs like Live 4, Live More, Body Beast. If you're looking for hardcore functional CrossFit style workouts, there are programs like Chop Wood, Carry Water, 6 weeks of the work. If you're looking for a program catered around the mornings, you got Morning Meltdown. If you're into yoga, Pilates, etc., they got programs for that. If you're looking for a boxing specific program, check out 10 Rounds. That's a 6 week program. 3 days a week of boxing based cardio, 2 days a week of weightlifting resistance work. On body, we got a 50% deal sale right now for those who are first time subscribers who want to be a member of Body. 50% off going right now, or at the very least, take advantage of the 2 week trial. And it is for 14 days, you get free access to any and all programs on Body, including the sample workout for the new program that's set to drop later on this year. Dig deeper. Let's get things going. Daniel, recapping took place this past weekend. Um, Normally, I would not have Edgar Berlanga as the main fight because he's not a champion and whatnot. But given what we're going to talk about later involving Canelo Alvarez, I think it's fitting that we feature him now. He returned to the ring after a pretty lengthy layoff. Fought Padraig McCrory, stopped him in 6 rounds. Um, I'll lead to you, Daniel, and give your assessment of this fight. Look, Berlanga at the beginning of this year had all this hype and buzz about this knockout art, about being a knockout artist, but his last handful of fights, he's going the distance. Uh, Seemed to find the power somewhat in this fight, though context is critical. Look who he was in the ring against, so he got the win. But more importantly, um, this victory for Berlanga could set up some big things later on in 2024.
This was not exactly a fight that you would say passes the audition for what we're going to talk about later, but it did the job that it was meant to do, which is basically give Berlanga a knockout in front of a very, very partisan crowd. This was in Orlando, large Puerto Rican community in Orlando. They do support the Puerto Rican boxers there, so it was a sellout. As for the fight itself, it wasn't much improvement from Berlanga. He was still very tentative as far as landing combinations. He was still very tentative as far as throwing the jab, but he did have power, and he was able to rock McCrory in the 6th round, which earned him the knockout. It wasn't a performance that you would say like rockets him back up to immediate talk about him being a great slash even elite fighter or somebody that you feel would be a proper heir to the Puerto Rican star that the island has been searching for ever since Tito and in some ways Miguel Cotto. But it did what it was supposed to do, and we know what it was supposed to do now, given what we're going to talk about in the news. But as far as the performance itself, I would not say it was impressive.
Um, and for those who are been sleeping under a rock, um, Berlanga, let's just say, and we'll talk about this later, but Berlanga is in the Canelo sweepstakes. I'll just leave it at that, and we'll get more in depth in that coming up. But there was also, along with this fight, there was also a triple header, world title triple header that took place in Tokyo this past weekend as well. I'm going to split these fights up here, Daniel. How can I do this? How can I do this? How I want to do this? If you were able to see Kosei Tanaka versus Christian Rangel, they fought for the WBO, vacant WBO uh, title at 115 pounds. Tanaka has been kind of quiet from a worldwide scale. Um, since his lone defeat to Kosei Tanaka, he really got outschooled and ultimately stopped in 8 rounds back in 2020, December 2020. Um, Back in the world title picture, took care of business against Rangel.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts?
This was a very interesting fight because between him and another fighter, because another fighter that I would not expect it to have done what he did, and compared to the headliner, he made it to a point where he had to fight almost in a phone booth with Rangel. Even though Tanaka had the faster hands, had the quicker combinations, had the crisper punches, he never really got to the point, even though he did win, it never really got to the point where you felt like Rangel was giving up the fight or felt like he knew that he lost it. That was interesting to me because, yeah, Tanaka's been on a tear to get himself back into the picture of elite Japanese fighters. And well, this performance was very well done. It was great efficient. We have to give actually take our caps out to Rangel. Was a very formidable challenger. Was able to take Tanaka's best shots and was still be able to come in wanting more. But it was in the side, it was a good performance for Rangel and for Tanaka. It gives him a belt. And interesting enough, like I said, it's a fight that I pretty much thought he would win. I didn't expect him to win the way that he did.
That's right. Workman-like is the way I would describe it. Excuse me. Um, from a sheer talent standpoint, Tanaka, the faster fighter, the quicker fighter with hands and feet, the more powerful guy. But the old adage is the thing that thwarts speed is a good left jab and timing, and that's what Rangel was able to do in the mainly the first half of the fight, almost. But to your point, Tanaka had to make some adjustments, and those adjustments was going to the body. Once he was able to do that, he was able to slow Rangel down. Also did some nice things in terms of his footwork to get himself in position to land shots. Um, and that was the difference. He kind of gained momentum in the mid rounds and really, he didn't run away with the fight, but he ended up winning. And the interesting thing is that afterwards he hinted that upcoming is a unification bout with IBF 115-pound champion Fernando Martinez, who won the title against Jerwin Ancajas. We'll talk about Ancajas in a bit, as he was in the main event. But in the co-main event, quote unquote, uh, a fighter who's getting a lot of buzz amongst hardcore fans, Junto Nakatani, former champion at 115 and 112. To a lot of boxing observers, scored the knockout of the year last year against Maloney last May, right in Las Vegas. He went up. He went up to 118 pounds to challenge WBC champion Alejandro Gonzalez. And I'll take this one, Daniel. And because I covered this entire card for Three Kings Boxing, please check out Three Kings Boxing, the source for pure, unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to the entire Three Kings Boxing crew. 2K, aka Project Boxing Talk, the man behind Three Kings, the owner of Three Kings Boxing. Bo, head of media relations, senior writer. You've heard him on this show numerous times. Bakari, fellow senior writer. I'm also a senior writer. Red, who's the editor, and all the contributors behind the scenes, Jay, Lazo, Corey, etc. Um, to say that Nakatani was impressive in this fight was an understatement. Most people felt that he was the favorite going in, and he dominated Daniel from moment one. I can only remember Santiago landing one significant punch, left hook towards the end of round two, but outside of that, Nakatani all the way. Better boxer, the more powerful hitter, and even though he was coming up in weight, he looked bigger. If you looked at his body in this fight, in contrast to his body when he was fighting at 115 and 112, he's starting to fill out. Um, Beautiful left hooks and uppercuts to finish him off, to hurt Santiago and finish him off in round six. Um, in my recap of this, I call Nakatani a praying mantis in boxing gloves. Uh, one of the elite fighters in the lower weight divisions. Uh, I know Takuma Inoue fought in the main event. He defended a belt at 118 pounds, Daniel. But I'm saying it right now, Nakatani is the best at 118 pounds. Uh, Inoue is the star among stars in Japan. Um, Ioka is a future Hall of Famer. But after that, I will put Nakatani in that mix. Uh, Junto Nakatani looks like just a force. And he's going to be, and has the look of a guy who's going to be a dominant fighter for years to come.
Yeah, Nakatani did what I thought we were going to get from all three Japanese fighters. Like, he measured distance, he landed combinations, he never let Gonzalez get any rhythm in the fight. And it was just a situation that once he got the first knockdown, you could tell it was only a matter of time. Because Gonzalez was able to get up, barely get up, mind you. And then within 15 seconds got knocked down again. And that's the knockdown that ultimately I think ended the fight. Nakatani showed great ring generalship, measured his distance, and was just a better overall fighter in this instance. Like I said, and he did the thing that I thought all three Japanese fighters would do, but they didn't do. With anyway, he didn't do what Nakatani did either, which was very surprising to me. But Nakatani's trying to make his case because he mentioned Kazuto's is a Hall of Famer, but he's also boxing wise maybe a little bit long in the tooth. He's not going to be around much longer, and well, now in a way, will certainly be the top star for a while. You can see him positioning himself probably more in the American shores, or trying to split evenly between American and Japanese shores coming in. So as far as like somebody that can picture as being more of a domestic star that you're guarantee you're gonna have a fight in Japan, Nakatani's put himself in that conversation.
And at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that Gail, she was not going to be with us tonight. I'm going to keep her comments up in the chat, telling us hello, joining in as a fan tonight. Dental work prevented her from appearing, but she's keeping an eye on things. So shout out to Gail. I hope to have her back next week. And the interesting thing, um, yeah, I have nothing more to add than what you just described about Nakatani. Excellent point, noting that he kind of splits time between Japan and the United States. For those who do not know, um, Nakatani is trained by excellent trainer Rudy Hernandez. Does the bulk of his preparation for fights in the United States, in Los Angeles, um, and because of that, because of the win over Maloney, the memorable knockout against Maloney, and his last 3-4 fights being aired either on ESPN Plus or the ESP on the ESPN networks, right? Either on ESPN or the ESPN Plus. He has a chance to become uh, a figure in the U.S. just like Inoue has been over the last 3-4 years here in the United States. I mentioned how I think that right now he's the best at 118 pounds, but he just moved up from 115. There are a lot of fighters there at junior bantamweight. Um, dare I say he beats them all, including Bam Rodriguez. I know that's a controversial statement, but yeah, at the very least, I want to see him in there with a Bam, in there with a Gallo Estrada. Bam and Gallo Estrada have signed to fight later on this year, right? Um, yeah, um, Nakatani, he looks sensational in this fight against Santiago. I'm really excited about his future and where he goes from here. In the main event, you had I mentioned Naoya Inoue. Well, his younger brother is Takuma Inoue, who's WBA champion at 118 pounds. One more comment from Gail before we go on. It said Nakatani is getting that good Mexican style sparring in LA. Absolutely. Excellent work from Rudy Hernandez. Nakatani, he's been back and forth in the United States since he was a teenager. Um, he's getting what you want, whether you want to call it Mexican style influence, American style influence, put it all together. Uh, it's making for a devastating package in that 112, 118 weight range. Back to Takuma anyway. Um, Fought German Ancajas, former champion at 115 pounds. And Ancajas Daniel was competitive. I think that in a way was a little bit tight in the beginning, but once he began to settle down, he would begin to get to work and land the punches. And for a guy who doesn't have the reputation of being a power puncher, only four of his previous wins had been by stoppage. He won by stoppage in this bout. The beautiful body shot.
Yep, and an interesting one. A right uppercut to the liver, which kind of tells you something a little bit the type of fight that this was. Like I said, I was very surprised that Takuma anyway was willing to go to the phone booth for as long as he did against Ancajas. Somebody say who's very well respected, ring veteran, former champion, knows a couple of tricks of the trade, and try to get younger fighters to make mistakes. And like I said, you would figure that Takuma would take a little bit more out of the playbook of his older brother. Now, anyway, and maintain distance while maintaining your distance while still showing that you are the better fighter in that area. He decided to go to the phone booth. And that may be a difference in styles. Obviously, maybe little brother wants to make himself very, very different from big brother. but it's a very entertaining fight. And Ancajas, he showed like say he's not completely like so you wouldn't say he's completely washed, but you could tell that his best days as a fighter are behind him. He's starting, unfortunately, a little bit of downward trajectory, but not a steep downward trajectory. But that body shot, like I said, they were fighting in the phone booth. Normally, the body shot that's in the liver that ends you is the left hook. This was a right uppercut in an exchange, and you could tell he hit it right in the mark because the best liver shots are the ones that get the delayed reaction. And you can tell Arcaha stopped literally doing anything for a second before going down on his knees and wasn't able to get up. He tried, but he wasn't able to get up. So it's a great showing by Inoue. Like I said, maybe trying to say he's going to fight in a different style than his brother, but overall, he's still showing that he is going to be talked about as a champion in his own right.
And what we could see potentially down the road, unification back between Inoue and Nakatani. Why do I say that? A day after the day after this triple header in Tokyo, there was a press conference featuring featuring Nakatani, featuring Tanaka, featuring Inoue, and when Junto Nakatani was asked about the possibility of a unification fight with Inoue, he said that he's interested. He said that's on his mind. Um, it would be a big fight for sure. Uh, do you the likelihood of it happening? I know both fighters will have mandatory uh, obligations um, to take care of before the end of the year, but let's just say early. Should both champions keep winning early first quarter 2025? Could it be on the table?
It depends how soon they can get their mandatories out of the way. Obviously, with Nakatani, he'll probably take a little bit longer because the fight was pretty interesting to see. And but anyway, it was a phone booth type of fight. It just mainly depends on how soon they can get those mandatory fights out of the way. Because while first quarter 2025 makes sense, it makes sense to me if you're gonna have to fight away from Japan. If you're gonna have a fight in the US, for example. But we know when it comes to domestic fights in Japan, the date is always New Year's Eve. That's the goal that you want to get because that's the big fight day in Japan when it comes to boxing. So I would not be surprised if both Nakatani anyway try to get those mandatories out of the way, or if they petition the sanctioning bodies to waive it on the guarantee that they will meet on New Year's Day.
Interesting, very very interesting. I don't think it will happen. I think for sure it'll happen in Japan. New Year's Eve. That's the big date in that country where a lot of the champions um, will fight either against a fighter outside of Japan or fight in a domestic showdown against another Japanese fighter. December 31st. That is the target date. I don't know if that will happen. Nakatani has what, since he won the title, I think 9 months to make his mandatory title defense. He may throw in a voluntary defense this summer, and then maybe have the mandatory toward the last quarter of the year. Uh, in a ways, mandatory defense should be the next fight, probably. But either way, if that fight was to happen, it would be a big deal in that area of the world. Let's move on to some news here. And we talked about it, we teased it a little bit. And if you listen to past episodes of Pound for Pound Box Report, since Gail is listening, she hinted at this possibility in the last couple of episodes, and it involves one Canelo Alvarez. over the last 24 hours, he has been his name has been hot in these boxing streets, and that is because the rumor is becoming not just a rumor but more of a reality at this point. Is that Canelo, who is technically in the middle of a three-fight deal with PBC, he and PBC have amicably parted ways, and it appears that Alvarez is going back to Matchroom. And the word on these streets is that Canelo is on the verge of signing a deal to fight Jaime Munguia this May. And even though Gail mentioned it last episode, and I was hesitant to accept it, should he defeat Munguia, possibility of Canelo fighting Edgar Berlanga in September? I don't want that. I don't want that, but that's the seem. It seems that's the direction that Canelo is going, and um, um, duly noted, Gail. You did more than hint that. Um, your thoughts on what has transpired when it comes to the undisputed super middleweight champion, Daniel?
There's so many layers to this story. The first one being obviously the implications involving PBC, because it looks like, at least if you want to believe what the rumor mill was, is that PBC was willing to pay that $35 million guarantee that Canelo wanted, but they were willing to do it for Jaime Munguia and not interested enough somebody who is not a PBC fighter rather than a PBC fighter in Jamal Charlo. The fact that they just willing to walk away, not take this to court, may be telling you that PBC, as far as Longview, may not have as bright of a future as a lot of people hope they would, particularly after hearing the Amazon deal. Because the only thing that we've heard so far about the fights that are going to be on Amazon have all been pay-per-views. The Tim Tszyu fight's going to be a pay-per-view. The Tank fight is going to be a pay-per-view. So I know we're going to talk about that one later too, but that should tell you, it's if it's something where is going to constantly be a situation where it has to be a pay-per-view, that's not a solid footing if you're going to have a lot of series of fights, considering the vast fighter roster that PBC has. That's one thing. Number two, unless I've missed it, I don't think Canelo rescinded his statement about a Mexican fighter, because that opens up a very, very interesting avenue if he picks Munguia first. Because remember, when I mentioned the statement, folks, I think it was for 2019, the statement that Canelo made that said he would never fight another Mexican for a world title, so not to divide the Mexican fan base. That goes out the window if you pick Munguia. And if Munguia's out the window, then there is absolutely no excuse for the next fighter after that to not be David Benavidez. Absolutely no excuse. PBC or not. So what it basically mean is now you have a different type of shade. Now you have some legitimacy to the ducking allegations that have been thrown at Canelo because of this news. Because I'm one of the people, and I know Gail said, like, AVC, anyone for Charlo. I will more than gladly take Jamal Charlo over Edgar Berlanga, particularly after that performance that we talked about at the beginning. That kid is not ready for prime time. He will not present the challenge. The only benefit from it is you want to draw on Mexico versus Puerto Rico. But at this point, everybody knows what Berlanga is. And yes, we all figured that Eddie Hearn did sign Berlanga for this specific purpose. But if it comes at the expense of not getting David Benavidez, especially now if you're going to fight Jaime Munguia, because now the Mexican thing is out the window, there's no excuse. Like if you pick Morel, then that'd be different because then you're challenging a young fighter that can give you problems and technically is one of your mandatories. That would be fine. But if you give him Munguia, you better not give us Berlanga next. Even though that's probably what will happen because Berlanga's with Eddie. If you give
Look,
us
man.
Munguia, if you give us Munguia, September has to be David Benavidez.
Look, man. I don't give a damn what no one says. Uh, the coincidence that Morel and Benavidez are associated with PBC and Canelo leaving there when everybody is calling for him to fight Benavidez, all that says to me that a large part of the reason he's leaving is because he doesn't want any parts of those two, particularly Benavidez. He don't want the fight. I wouldn't be surprised if behind the scenes they kind of urge him to say, if you're going to stay with us, you're going to have to give Benavidez a fight. He is your mandatory. He deserves to be in the ring with you more than anyone. And Canelo, being Canelo, uh, and because he can get away with it, um, he said no, I'm not doing it, and I'm a take my belts and go over to Matchroom. You can't convince me otherwise. I see some comments here. Um, what Gail, she said, yes, she did say ABC, anybody but Charlo. Um, I'll take Charlo. To Daniel's point, I'll take Charlo over Berlanga all day, every day. She also says that Benavidez is an American. There was never a Mexican excuse there. It's not even an American versus Mexican things for me. For me, it's the issue of Benavidez deserves it. He has worked his way into that fight. Again, he is his mandatory. He needs to fight him. That's what the people want. What you need. Shout out to what you need joining us from the Caribbean. He also says, "How are you?" Benavidez versus Morel would be a great fight. I agree. And if they're not, if Benavidez, if Canelo doesn't want any parts of Benavidez, that should be the next viable option. But I didn't put this in the docket in the description below for those who are checking us out on YouTube. But Benavidez, it looks like he's going to move up to 175 to fight Alexander Gvozdyk for an interim belt at 175 pounds. That's his next move right there. He also said what you need. He also said that Canelo has been ducking Benavidez for a good minute. Uh, you ain't got to tell me that. I've been chatting that for the past year, for all of 2023. He doesn't want that smoke with him, and this is just another example of that. And I'm giving Canelo some. I get it from a money perspective, why he's moving back to Matchroom. Excuse me. A fight between Canelo and Munguia is a good money fight. Berlanga, I don't care if it's a good money fight. He doesn't deserve it. Benavidez is the cat he should be in the ring with. So not only Canelo deserves side eye to me, this is a mark, a stain on his career. I'll go to you, Daniel, to finish this topic off, please.
Yeah, that's like I said. When it comes to Canelo, unfortunately, it's also a situation where you're never going to really be happy over what his choices are going to be in that front because if it's unless like I said unless it's straight Benavidez and Morel the next two fights because then he's willing to challenge himself against the top two when it comes in those belts and That's it. What Gail's mentioned. Dave Benavidez has had two separate opportunities to force the issue in becoming the Canelo, but because of his own actions, they were taken away. They weren't taken away in the ring. They were taken away in drug testing. That's the issue. That's unfortunately the issue that's facing when it comes to Benavidez as far as forcing the issue. And we just had to see, because if it's Munguia first, like I said, we want you needs to be Benavidez next. If it's Berlanga next, then we know that at this point that Canelo's fully on like the Floyd exhibition mode of his career.
Yeah, and I don't think it's been officially announced. At least it wasn't as of a couple of hours before this live taping. But that is the direction that many people feel Canelo again leaving PBC, and he's moving back to Matchroom. And the strong rumor is that he's going to fight Jaime Munguia on in May, and then should he win that, strong likelihood he's going to fight Berlanga in September. I don't like it, but it is what it is. One more comment from Gail. Um, and I'll put it back. She said, the problem is Benavidez lost the super middleweight belt twice. Otherwise, he um, could have forced a mandatory with Canelo earlier. In her last comment is, um, one was a scale fail, the other one was a failed drug test. Thanks for the correction. Other news here. Um, Gervonta Davis, aka Abdul Wahid, he's officially changed his name now. Um, People have been waiting to see what he's going to do after the layoff, and the he was served a stint in jail for breaking the terms of how violating the terms of his house arrest last year, following the win of Ryan Garcia. People have been waiting to see what he does when he makes his return to the ring. Daniel, we now know he's going to fight Frank Martin. Date has not been set, but the two have agreed to fight each other uh, back and forth, really, for the past couple of months now, between Tank and Haney. And Haney has moved up to 140 pounds now, right? He's going to fight Ryan Garcia in April. There's Shakur out there at 135. Will Will Tank get the credit for fighting Frank Martin, or is this another case of Tank, despite the star that he is, not fighting quote unquote elite competition? Unmute your mic, Daniel.
Well, the that's a tricky situation of it, because one of the things that got thrown against Tank is that he's not willing to fight a very skilled black fighter. Again, Frank Martin, you can debate how fully skilled he is, but he does fit the bill. He's earned that right. So it is an interesting test, because luckily it isn't a retread when it comes to Tank. Because otherwise, the fights that you were looking for would have been a rematch between the two fighters that are going to be facing each other in the Tim Tszyu undercard, Rowley and Isaac Cruz. And that, for with Devin Haney also tied up now in his fight with Ryan Garcia, there's not a lot of avenues that you can take when it comes to a credible challenger for Tank that is gonna make people other than Tank fans and degenerates like us to possibly fork over the pay-per-view money that Amazon's going to be asking. And that's the main issue of it. he shouldn't get criticism for taking a fight against somebody that is very, very skilled, even though I do believe that he's still going to beat Frank Martin at this stage. But it's just mainly that. It's Frank Martin is a good fighter, but you wouldn't pick him to be a pay-per-view caliber challenger. And that's going to be the issue that Tank is going to probably deal with when it comes to this fight.
Particularly from the critics, his fans are going to watch it regardless. He is a star in this sport. He is one of the faces of boxing. So he's going to draw numbers regardless in terms of the serious heads, the serious enthusiasts. Um, they want to see him step up in in competition. Sure, his fight against Ryan Garcia did a lot of numbers, but Ryan Garcia, no offense, not a top fighter at 135, 140 range. Shakur, more to the point, is, but but we're not going to see that anytime soon, and people still uh, um, there's a certain negativity amongst when it comes to Shakur, given his last performance against De Los Santos. People feel some kind of way about that. Comment here from What You Need. He says, "Sever Tank has never faced the best in any division he has fought in." I agree. I agree. When he was champion at 130, um, there were opportunities for him to fight someone like a Loma or shoot for a unification bout. He never did. Same thing here at 135. There's been numerous opportunities to get a high profile fight to fight another champion. But let's face it, for years he was with Floyd, and Floyd protected this dude. Uh, saw him as a cash cow, saw him as a pay per view attraction,
Mm-hmm.
made Tank a pay per view attraction, but at what expense? Him not fighting the best of the best. So yeah, I agree with you. What you need 100% on that. Let's move on to some more news. We mentioned in our discussion about David Benavidez moving up to fight light heavyweight, fighting Alexander Gavastik for I think a interim WBC belt. Correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel.
Yep.
Here's the thing: despite all the hell that I raised about Canelo not fighting Benavidez, as What You Need noted in the chat, Benavidez and Morrell would be an excellent fight at 168 pounds. Could Benavidez, should Benavidez be trying to make a fight with him at 68 as opposed to moving up to 175 to fight for an interim title?
That's a tough cookie to go. That's a tough, tough cookie to really think it over because on one end, doing what he's done, what he's allegedly doing, like moving to 175 to fight somebody that, yeah, we know he's past his prime. We kind of know he's not has been the same since Stevenson. But Vostok is still somewhat of a credible name at at the top of the division. One reason why is for an interim belt, and it does put Benavidez in the position of becoming a mandatory for the winner of Berterbiev versus Bivol. Here's the main issue, unfortunately, that falls in line with it. You mentioned number one, that he has a credible challenger, somebody that could challenge him in morale in the division. But I think David, at least his team, is at a point where if they're going to stay at 168, they want to do it for the big cash. They want to do it only for Canelo. Even though Benavidez versus Murray would be a very, very entertaining fight. So if you're not going to get Canelo, what are your other options? The only other option for somebody of Benavidez' size is to move up. And you probably beat Vostok at this stage. And then you're going to get a real challenge if you stay in that route. Because at one end, if it's Beterbiev, you're going to get somebody that can take a punch and hits like a mule. If Bivol winds up winning, if you have somebody that can outclass you in the ring, with the only advantage being that if he doesn't knock you out in the 3 rounds, he's just going to try to outskill you when it comes to a decision. That's two decent avenues for David to look at. If there is no way that in September he won't be Canelo's next challenger, it's the move that he has to make because he can't wait. He really can't wait at this stage and just stall when it comes to getting a Canelo fight. We've seen what has happened when people wait a little bit too long to get the fight that they really, really want to get. And sometimes they either get it when it's way too late or they don't get it at all. We all remember Maypac, a fight that was 5 years too late. And we also remember that at one point Amir Khan was gunning for Floyd and never really got to the choice because he chose to either try to wait or his cotton candy chin caught up to him.
Um, in our discussion about Nakatani, I mentioned that I would like to see him fight some of the guys at 100 and 15 at 115. A couple more comments from What You Need. He also says that the Vostics is easier work than Morel. I tend to agree. He says Morel is big for 168 pounder. Listen. What You Need. We all talk about the size of Benavidez and how he could easily fight at 175 pounds, same as Morel, who has a lot of size and athleticism for a super middleweight. He could easily fight at 175 pounds too. That's why your earlier point was so important because if Canelo doesn't want to fight these two, why not Morel and Benavidez fight each other? It would be one of the best matchups in the sport, in my opinion. In our discussion about Nakatani, I said wouldn't mind him fighting some of the guys at 115 pounds. I mentioned Bam Rodriguez and Juan Francisco Estrada. They have signed Daniel to fight each other. The fight's gonna be this summer for Gallo Estrada's WBC belt at 115 pounds. We'll talk about it more as the fight draws closer and when there's a official date. If you were to ask me if these two, let's just say a year ago, if they were to fight, I would feature Estrada. But the way that Bam looked in the win over Sonny Edwards and the layoff from Gallo, ask me right now, I'll probably say Bam. Either way, it's an excellent fight. I'm glad it's happening.
Yes. So am I. Like, it's a good fight to get for somebody like Bam. He's still very young. He's at the stage of his career where a loss to somebody like Gallo or even like somebody like Chocolatito won't hurt him in the long run. Because, like I mentioned, that's Gallo Estrada and Chocolatito. Either one of those two. And Bam has the advantage of also having a little bit of a chip on his shoulder compared to Gallo, because Gallo, after beating Chocolatito, he's made his point. He doesn't really have a situation where he is gonna really, really push. Bam does. So that's gonna be very fun and it's gonna be a very entertaining fight. And who knows? Like I said, it leads into two avenues for me. you either get a fresh matchup between Bam and Chocolatito, or you get what would be like Chocolatito Gallo 4, 3 or 4. I forgot which one. I think it was 4 at this stage.
They
Either
fought three
way,
times.
yeah. So it would be number 4. It would still be entertaining, but either way, we'd probably be happy with the results. Whoever wins.
Last point here. News regarding Triple G, that kind of broke right before. Well, not right before, but a few hours before. We hit the record button. In terms of Triple G, not necessarily in the ring, Daniel, but outside of the ring. For those who are out of the loop, please explain.
Yes. Okay. When it comes to Gennady Golovkin, and thank you, Gail, for mentioning this to us on this news because I also peeped it as well. Gennady Golovkin has a new job. He is the president of the National Olympic Committee of his native Kazakhstan. This very, very likely means that even though he hasn't publicly stated it, for all intents and purposes, we can now say that Gennady Golovkin is retired as a fighter. At least in the main elite schedule when it comes to boxing. Because obviously running an Olympic committee for a country is not exactly a part-time gig. And especially in the position he's going to be in, he's going to be looking at Kazakh fighters, amateur fighters that he can bring into the committee program and maybe guide them to have a better path in the pro ranks and avoid the mistakes, unfortunately, that he had to make early on in his career. So it's very, very interesting. But what this also does is it does give him a built in reason for if he's going to have the next last fight, it's going to be in Kazakhstan as his last hurrah, so last stand. So, in many ways, it's sad to see Gennady Golovkin go, but it's better for him to be go now while he has his faculties in check than going a little bit longer and then getting into a situation where he may get hurt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, say what you want um, about Golovkin. He's had a heck of a career, right? Long reign as middleweight champion. The three fights with Canelo Alvarez, the first two fights, in particular 2017, 2018, were sensational, right? Unified champion in the division. So his career, it's been stellar. Um, it's clear that he's making the transition to outside of the ring. Happy for him in his new position, and we wish him the best. On what seems like his exit plan from the sport. One more comment from Gail before we move on to talk about some more fights here. He says, unlikely to see, we see Bam versus Chocolatito. Tekken doesn't like to put the top fighters, guys, against each other. If you're talking Japanese fighters, Gail, I would say yeah. But the fact that these are a Mexican fighter versus a Mexican American fighter, and it's a fact that Eddie Hearn wants it to happen, and has been low key, high key, talking about this fight for the last year and a half. I tend to believe that it will happen. In short, they're both co-promoters with Taken. I think that Hearn is going to have bigger sway here. He's going to have more pull here, and because of that, we will see that fight this summer. We will see that fight. Let's move on to some preview what's happening this upcoming weekend. And let's start with the ladies, Daniel, specifically Amanda Serrano, champion um, at 126, undisputed champion. She makes her return to the ring, fighting in her home country, Puerto Rico, against Nina Meinke. Um, Look, I've been critical of Serrano. Her last few fights have gone to decision. I was hoping that she would get some knockouts here, and I think these fights have been a little bit tougher than she wants it to happen. I hope she gets a knockout in this fight. I want to see the destructive force that Serrano was 3, 4 years ago, leading up into the fight with Katie Taylor. Will we see it now that she's fighting in her home country of Puerto Rico?
I really hope we do. I really hope we do because she really, really, really wants to get that rematch with Katie Taylor. She wants to avenge her win. And the only way to really do it is to force the issue. And unfortunately, if you do have lack performances that you wouldn't say lackluster, but they weren't like statement making performances, that's it's the rematch with Katie Taylor that gets it farther away. So hopefully she goes into it. You know, she really likes to make a pretty good performance, show out whenever Puerto Rican fans, whether it's Orlando or in Puerto Rico, and I know she'll definitely try. But we also have to remember it can be a dangerous case where one of the things that we liked about Serrano, which is that she was willing to go to different weight classes to make tough fights. Maybe that situation is starting to catch up with her. And it could be a situation where that explosiveness is no longer there at a sustainable rate. But I really do hope we see it.
On the undercard of that on the undercard, you have the return of Jonathan Gonzalez fighting Rene Santiago. I don't know what to make of Santiago. He's been had fights canceled and whatnot. Uh, um, he's going to be the favorite. He should win against Santiago. If he does, let's hope he finally gets in the ring with the unification bout against Kinshiro Taraji. That's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to some other fights here. While that fight is happening in Puerto Rico on ESPN, the return of Luis Alberto Lopez defending the IBF belt against Reiya Abe. I admit I don't know much about Abe. I've seen him on film. Decent fighter. To me, Alberto Lopez, when he beat Michael Conlan, I thought he looked very, very good. But in his last fight, lucky to get the win, very, very close. I was like, very mid. I can't get a read on him, on the champion, Lopez. He seems very inconsistent to me. When he's at his best, if he's at his best in this fight, I think he wins. But if not, he could have some difficulty coming.
That's the part where Lopez said that bothers me. It's the inconsistency. And it does come in inopportune moments. I'm really, really hoping we don't get to see that in this fight because this should be a serviceable win for him. This should be a good and a statement win for him. But that's the issue. We don't know if it's going to wind up happening.
On the undercard, you have I think it's the fight for the WBA belt. Correct me if I'm wrong. If the world title's on the line between an up and coming fighter I really like, Raymond Ford versus Otabek uh, Komatova, Komatov. Excuse me. I think Komatov is very very good fighter. He's being slept on here. I think he's very very solid. Um, Rough. You're not going to roll over him, but Ford, talented boxer, southpaw, can move. has shown some power in recent outings. To me, to me, this these two fights are with Ford, as well as the main event is going to happen in Verona, New York on ESPN. I think this fight between Kholmatov and Ford, I think this is the best fight of the weekend.
This is going to be a very fun fight. Kholmatov is coming in, and he has a lot of hype, a lot of pedigree coming in. This is going to be, I think this is going to steal the night, honestly, because both these guys are going to come in motivated. Both of these guys want to come in wanting to show out and want them off. And ultimately, I think this is a situation where no matter who wins, we're all going to be wind up happy.
Indeed, indeed. And I think that is the last fight, and we're going to end things on that note. I want to thank everybody for their comments in the chat, whether it's Gail and whether it's what you need. I really, really appreciate it. If you have not done so, please make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe as well. Going, going to go to you, Daniel. Daniel from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber podcast for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk any and all things Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Same handle everywhere, folks, whether it's on Twitter, Threads, Mastodon, Blue Sky, RAWKZ99. Definitely catch me on there because I don't know what it is when it comes to boxing. When it comes to boxing and things outside of the ring being a little bit more volatile than inside of the ring, we need to swing that around. But it's a sport that never. It's a sport that always disappoints, but yet it never disappoints.
Yeah, that dichotomy, that contrast happens at the same time. That is boxing in many ways in a nutshell for those who want to talk. Um, One more comment here, I think from Gail. She says, fun to be a listener tonight. See you guys next week. Indeed, indeed. For those who are new, not for those who are new, for those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness with me on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X, um, you can do so, brother JR at brother JRSC. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and all things colognes and fragrance on IG and TikTok, you can do so at brother JRSC. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Boxer Report, we will do a recap of the doubleheader on ESPN in Verona, New York, between Luis Alberto Lopez and Reiya Abe. The undercard, of course, is Otabek, Kholmatov, and Raymond Ford for the vacant WBA 126-pound title. And we also do a recap of Amanda Serrano, her title defense against Rene Meinke, as well as Jonathan Gonzalez defending his WBO belt, WBO junior flyweight belt against Rene Santiago. And we will do a preview of the monster card, the big card over in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia. Headliner, of course, is Anthony Joshua fighting Francis Ngannou. On the undercard, Jilly Zhang fighting Joseph Parker. Ray Vargas makes his return to the featherweight division, defending his WBC featherweight belt against Nick Ball. Um, who else is on there? Mark Chamberlain versus Gavin Gwynn. Big card over on in Saudi Arabia. Again, the headliner of that is Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou. That's going to be on pay-per-view. Going to be on a Friday, folks. 10:15 a.m. Strange time, strange day for it to happen, but it really is. Whatever the Saudi officials want at this point, they basically get. Excuse me. So yeah, this has been episode 436 of Pound for Pound Box Report. For Daniel from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber, I am your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.